I just had you muted, so. So,
Steve,
yes.
I just have a question. You said they use what kind of pollination? Buzz. They go in and buzz around.
Right.
Okay.
Hopefully you'll see that here.
Shake it out.
They use their wing muscles. I don't know if they disconnect their wings, but anyway, they use their wing muscles and vibrate, and it shakes the pollen loose. Plus, when bees fly, apparently, based on, yes. Good question?
Oh, no.
Okay. Now, they generate a positive charge, and the flowers have a negative charge, at least the pollen does. So when the bee gets to the flower, it helps the pollen fly to the bee. I'm going to play this video, and hopefully we can see and hear what's going on. So you can see they just land the second buzz. See that on, if you see your tomatoes being pollinated, or if you see borage being pollinated, it might be the little two-spotted bumblebee doing that buzz pollination. Here you see now, as I said, I use an app for the bee identification, so I don't know if that's a mining bee or a sweat bee, but you can see it scraping the pollen off that flower anther. And then on the right, the sweat bee on that evening primrose also seems to be focused on the anther of the plant. Plants also provide bees with nest materials. Now, this is an introduced bee, but it is well established in the United States. It's not going away. It's a wool carder bee. It's European. I will say that the males are quite the bully. They will defend an area from all of the other bees. So it's a bit of a competition there with native bees. But I saw this female collecting nesting material off this plant. So this is a fuzzy plant, some kind of an artemisia. She's using her jaws, I guess, to comb it off the stem. And you can see her pack it up under her belly there. And off she goes. And she will make her nest, line her nest and make her egg cells with that material. These are leaf cutter bees. If you've ever seen a leaf with a semicircle cut out of it, this is a leaf cutter bee. They're in the family Mecachylidae, large jaws, and that's what they do with their jaws. They snip these big pieces of leaves out, and they, in the case of the lower right there, that's a female carrying a piece of leaf into a piece of wood with a hole bored in it. I did make some artificial nest blocks, and that's the best I could do getting a picture of them using it. And I'll use any variety of plants to do this, but not that particular. On the upper right, you can see this leaf cutter bee has a very hairy belly. That's where they collect their pollen. That's their specialization. These are some leaf cutter nests. The upper left is a man-made structure that splits open. You can see the cell divisions there, and the egg cells that are there, you can see are made of leaf material. On the right, you can see how they even cap the tunnel with a bunch of leaf pieces. And on the lower left here, this is a piece of 1/4-inch irrigation tubing that had the end open. And they thought that was a good tunnel to use. So you can even see in this, these are pollen and honey, or nectar, I'm sorry, mixed together into bee bread. And you can see the little white egg or larva on one of those. Extension does have a net guide on how to make these artificial nest boxes, G2256, and you make the holes different length and diameter for different bees. So the larger the bee, the wider and the deeper the hole. And so if you have a variety of holes, you might see a variety of bees. And that's one thing I enjoyed about doing this. It doesn't matter what kind of wood it is, just as long as it's not treated. And as long as it's not so soft that it gets shaggy when you drill a hole in it, because they don't like slivers in there. And I got to see different varieties of bees, like the app says this is a giant resin bee. And you can see one of the holes here, it's kind of sealed off with some kind of resin. It says this is a mason bee. And of course, they make their holes with, or seal their holes in their egg cells with mud. And you can see the exit holes in some of those where the bees had come out. But also, there's a mason wasp, which makes its egg cells with mud and seals them off with mud. And I guess I wouldn't have known the difference without seeing the wasp there. And I did break open a woodblock that had not shown any success. I didn't see any emergence out of it. And I did find this wasp in the bottom of it. I don't know why it died there. So there are problems with these artificial nests. This was an interesting species that showed up, a grass-carrying wasp. And I have a little video, I don't have it here, but she literally stuffs grass at the end of that thing to seal it off. And she makes her nest egg cells with grass. This is another wasp that frequents these artificial sites, and I'm not fond of it. It's a parasitoid wasp. It parasitizes the nests of the bees. So the bee cutters go to all this trouble to make these nests, lots of egg cells in there, and she comes along. She just sits there on the face of the woodblocks waiting until they're done. And she walks along and picks the tunnel. And if you watch this, you'll see her driving her whole repository. Of life. Over her back. So I've raised a lot of wasps too. And I found a lot of failure. I don't know why, I don't know what's causing this. I asked Jody Green at Extension, she's not exactly sure. But you can see when I open some of these cells, there's just a lot of frass in there. We don't know what that is. And if you look here, if you can see that cursor, this big piece of bee bread here, here's a little larva or egg attached to it that never lived to eat the bee bread. So there's a lot of failure, and there are a lot of wasps. There's some success too. So, as you said in the, I guess it was a Facebook post, there are recommendations to clean these or make new blocks every year. That's a lot of work. Drilling these holes takes time and elbow grease, and my bits are getting dull. And so I'm not sure that, you can decide whether you want to do that or not. It is really interesting. I'm not sure that, I don't see mites. I don't know if the varroa mites are big enough to see the naked eye. I think they are.
They're really tiny.
Yeah. And I know the wasps are there. And it's very interesting. But anyway, so it's a little problematic. So the more natural way to help cavity nesting bees, they're called, not just stem nesting bees. This is one way to help them more naturally. This is in the garden. So for example, in the upper right there, let's say it's summer, kind of like now. The bees are out there and they're busy laying eggs in old stems. And this graphic, the gray stems are old. And, the bees have found them and they're laying eggs inside them. So the new growth maybe hides all that. In the fall, and from fall to late winter is the time to go out there and cut those stems. The bees are not active. You would not want to cut the old last year's stems. You want to cut the newest growth. The previous year's stems might have bees in them. You can just leave that there, because next spring the bees will come out. But this year's growth, between late fall and late winter. You want to cut those to anywhere from 8 to 24 inches high. And come spring, the bees that come out of those old stems, the gray ones, are going to find those stems and use them. Now I say the bees. Mostly these are stem nesting bees. There are a couple of species that are common. One is kind of pan-global, the small carpenter bee. It's the genus Ceratina, and it's kind of global. So it's everywhere, and that's mostly what I've got in my yard. So they lay their eggs in those stems. Their eggs are in there. Now, depending on the species, they may survive the winter as an egg, as a larva, as a pupa, or as an actual adult. And the small carpenter bees, I think, survive winter as adults. They just spend winter in the stems. They've never been out yet. They just develop all the way to adulthood, and they're sitting in there. So one winter, I accidentally broke this stem off a plant, and I said, I wonder if there's anything down there. So I broke the bottom off, and sure enough, there was this little carpenter bee. Just looking at its face, if you can see that, it's got a white delta kind of shape. So this is a male. It looks like to me, I think, a small carpenter bee. So I taped it back together and stuck it somewhere. Now, first thing in spring, first day over 65, 70 degrees, sunny day, but a little. But these are those stems. Some of them came out of those stems, and honestly, a lot of them are looking to go right back in there and start making nests. So this is what it looks like at the top of the stem where the bees make their hole, and they tunnel down in there. If you watch this little video clip very carefully, they're flicking little pieces of pulp with their hind leg off to the left side of them. And so you look around, it's very easy for me. Look, there's one. That's what they look like, the small carpenter bee. I'm not sure what they're doing right there. That's how the females, I believe they're females, spend most of their time with their rear ends sealing the nest site. Nobody's going to get in there. But you can see the signs of this with these piles of frass. I can see these all over my yard. And it's a very telltale sign that the carpenter bees are busy there. In fact, this one up here, you can see the bee up here doing her work, and got the residue down here. So many kinds of plants they'll do this to. These are the species in my yard that I've seen them use just this year. Joe Pye, wild bergamot, Indian grass, switchgrass, narrow-leaf coneflower, pale purple coneflower, several species of liatris, New England aster, smooth blue aster, another aster, some kind of verbena that's dead, so I don't know which species it was. The hyssop, blue fortune hybrid, giant Noah hyssop, Eryngium sea holly, Eryngium rattlesnake master, blue sage or pitcher sage, wild senna, bottle gentian, hibiscus, elderberry, and Annabelle hydrangea. And so what is that? That's like 25, something like species. And so they're not real, yes.
I'm just kind of curious if you see them use any daylilies.
I've only got one daylily, so I don't know. But there's another list, we'll look at that.
It's
Some species prefer, well, the next slide shows. This is from the University of Minnesota. It shows that leafcutter bees use hollow stems or pithy stems. Resin bees use hollow stems. So you can see there's a difference. Some bees prefer hollow already, like grass stems or the mint family, like monardas and thistles. Those are hollow already. You cut them, they're hollow. Joe Pye, you cut it, it's hollow, usually. But most species of plants have a pithy stem. And so there is some difference in preference. And I know it's probably hard to read all that. What's the genus of daylily? H-Y?
Hemerocallis.
Hemerocallis?
It's not on there.
Don't see it.
But it's not a native either.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm not sure they care. I mean,
Is hibiscus native? Because we had
Yes.
that.
There
in the-
are some,
hibiscus.
there are some native.
So there are a few more species. Here's the rest of their list. There are a few more species here than I had, but they go ahead and say, please share your observations of bee nests to help this list grow. So again, if you're looking for this information, you can go to the University of Minnesota Bee Lab. Or I can share this, and you can get it off the recording. Now, that was for cavity nesting bees. Let's go back to that. A lot of this talk here is about stems, but the fact is they also use logs, tree trunks, rocks, anywhere they can find a tunnel, or like an old wood borer tunnel in a log or a tree stump, something like that. So I've got hundreds and hundreds of cut stems. Bees by the thousand. They're all small carpenter bees, except maybe a yellow-faced bee. I think I saw a little yellow-faced poke out once. I'm not seeing any other cavity nesting bees in there. So where are they nesting? I don't know. Got a neighbor kitty corner with a kind of a wood lot. Maybe they're over there. The other neighbors have turf deserts, so they're not nesting there. I'm not sure. But most native bee species are ground nesters. Bumblebees are one example. They actually nest underground, not deep, but shallowly underground. They like abandoned rodent burrows. Most recently, we've been seeing these huge bumblebees. Those are the queens. They're the only bumblebees that survive winter. They come out in spring and they need food. They need nectar, pollen to start their nest. So they're looking for nest sites and food. And you're going to see them less and less. Pretty soon, we're just going to see the workers, their offspring. Because the queens will stay in the nest, so they're eusocial, like honeybees, but they stay and lay eggs and help with the nest, and there are some workers helping with the nest, and other workers are out doing the foraging. But they're different because they're an annual colony, where honeybees can survive winter. Every bumblebee except the queen, like a new queen from the colony, will mate in the fall. Those queens will find a place to hibernate in the leaves or under a log or the ground or something. And they emerge in the spring and start it all over again. That's quite different from the stem nesting bees, where they got a stem full of babies that come out in the spring. Those bees never saw their offspring, whereas the bumblebees live with their offspring. There's more than one bumblebee. You saw the slide that said there are 49 species in the U.S. So I've got 5 in my yard, and I would bet most of you could find 5 if you were spending as much time as I do watching them. But they tell mostly by the field markings of how many of their abdominal segments are hairy and what the hairs look like. So on the left, there's one, the first abdominal segment is yellow hairs. It's a common eastern bumblebee. The next one, the first abdominal segment is black, and the next 2 are yellow. That's a black and gold bumblebee. The next one is, I guess it's 3 segments are yellow. That's the American bumblebee. This one, the first segment is yellow, and the next one is the brown belt. So that's the brown belted bumblebee. And the next one is the 2-spotted bumblebee. And its first segment is yellow, and the second segment is just 2 furry spots. And that's hard to see, and I only see that by taking video, because they're all busy. So I take the video, and and then I stop it and zoom in. And I can tell I've got these different species. If you see a little bumblebee about a half-inch long, there's a decent chance it's a two-spotted bumblebee because they're very small. Most underground nesting bees are solitary. Sometimes they'll share a tunnel. They'll go down one tunnel and I'll nest over here and you nest over there. Sometimes they'll find an area of ground they like and they'll find a bunch of nests. I won't, but I've seen Heather Holm, if you've heard of her, she's the author who's written these great bee books. And I've seen her on webinars and she'll find an area where there's columns, a bunch of bees nesting because they like that soil. They apparently like compacted sandy soil. Now, I've never seen a ground nesting bee working on its nest, but I see these holes, and obviously these are excavated holes. I know that there are night crawlers, of course, they make holes, and cicadas and all that, but these are obviously excavated holes, and they're not cicada killer ones, these are bee holes. I never see the bee, and I also see, sometimes I'll see a hole, I'll go check it the next day, it looks different, I'll check it the next day, and it's sealed over, it's gone. So I know they're around, and I know they're on my flowers, because I find them on the flowers. So what can you do? It's kind of hard. You want to have no mulch?
So I was kind of playing around with my soil for lavender because
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
told me it's too wet where I am.
Yeah,
So I rebuilt my entire lavender bed. So I did rocks and soil and sand.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tons of bumblebees digging in there.
No kidding.
I have it all along the area where my garden is, and I have a little brick wall. It's about that tall.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd lift this up and see what's under there. When I lifted that up, I had tons of stuff in there.
Wow.
So they had used it, and when I first moved in, I didn't have hardly any bees at all. But this past year, I think I've seen 69 different species.
Whoa.
So, and I think by prepping the soil for the lavender, prepping the soil for my peonies, and having those edge bricks and everything,
Yeah.
like they'll go along I use those little triangle edgers,
Yeah.
and I plant them
Yeah.
so that the narrow end is down.
Yeah.
And they go down in between those bricks, and and I don't pack it with clay in between there.
Right.
I use really light soil in between all those bricks, and tons of that.
What's your soil mix like?
I've got a lot of sand
Yeah.
now. I've mixed a lot of loam in and a lot of sand. Like I just use sandbox sand to kind of mix it up a little bit.
Right.
Plus I have a mulch pit that I use all the stuff that comes off my yard. I just dig that into the ground and rotate it over. But the lavender would not grow because it was too wet.
Too bad.
So I completely redid that whole patch
Yeah.
just to see if I could get it to
Yeah.
grow. It's like an ultimate challenge.
Yeah.
And my side effect was bees.
Huh.
You can see them like flying into that area. And
Uh-huh.
at first I thought, oh, they just really like that lavender. And then I realized, no, they like the soil.
I'm gonna have to find a place to try that. Okay, so this just pictures of some ground nesting bees. The two-spotted longhorn bee, you can see, maybe you can see in the lower. Sorry. Maybe you can see why it's called a longhorn bee. The antenna here, and the two spots, obviously. It's a pretty big bee, so it must make a pretty big hole. There's a yellow-legged mining bee. It's about a half-inch long, not a very big bee. Digger bee, another ground nesting bee. Look at the mouth parts on that thing. It's on a thistle, and you kind of need some long mouth parts, or you're going to have to burrow down into that thistle. But it's prepared for that. And then on the other side, the orange-legged sweat bee or fur bee does not have those kind of mouth parts, so it's on a flower. It's where everything's much more accessible. So again, a diversity of flower types for a diversity of bees. These are more ground nesting bees, the mining bee. That might be a European bee. It keeps keying out, or the app keeps calling it a Wilkie's mining bee, but I think that's a European bee. And then these striped sweat bees are very common. and they like primroses. Sorry?
They like the Texas variety and the Missouri variety
Texas.
both.
Okay. So I can, again, you're all pretty familiar with this. I can go through a lot of what I have left here are plants for pollinators. How to choose plants for bees and other pollinators, native if possible. The general rule is native rule. You want plants suited to the site conditions. Lavender is not going to grow in clay. Diverse in size, shape, color, diverse in bloom time, blooming throughout the season. You can't get any one plant to bloom throughout the season. You need a dozen species to get you through April to October. And use a simple straight species, not fancy varieties generally. And if you can throw in some host plants for the butterflies, that'd be great. So here are some pollinator plants not. Okay, we can debate this, and certainly there are exceptions, but in general, these are not good plants for pollinators. Bulbs, dandelions, irises, daylilies, peonies, hostas, geraniums, the kind that you find bright red in pots. The impatiens, the shade impatiens, ornamental grasses, vinca, lilac, regilla, hydrangeas, most hydrangeas, I'll say. I'm going to throw that out there. We can debate that. The ornamental pears, because that's an invasive species. Ginkgo does nothing for them. Clematis, burning bush, privet, yew, buxbaum. So, if you took away all those plants from our front yards, what would be left? Not much. And would the bees care? No. They don't really get much from those plants. So plants that are not the best, you don't want flowers that are doubled and redoubled like this to where the bees can't even find the nectar or the pollen, or maybe the plant doesn't even have nectar or pollen anymore. And it's been found in one study that red 9-bark, just the color of the plant, the beetles that like to eat 9-bark don't eat the red one, they don't like the red one. So try to get the straight green 9-bark species. And irises, just an example. If you've got some big floppy flower that has no, plus as you know, some flowers have ultraviolet guidelines for bees to find the nectar source. But we cannot see, but the bees can see. And by the time the flowers have been this modified, those guidelines might be gone.
Steve,
Yes.
the slide before that, and plants not, you listed dandelions.
Yeah.
Now, I've always been told to leave your dandelions in the spring because
Yeah.
they supposedly help pollinators. Is that not true?
If you have nothing else, you can leave dandelions. If you have a choice, plant anything else that's native.
That will bloom early.
That blooms that time of year. I can show some here. But dandelions are not considered nutritious for pollinators.
And you
If the
won't
pollinator
find
is desperate. If you really look at your dandelions, do you see anything on those dandelions?
ants. I found ants and a few tiny bees, occasionally a honeybee.
Pretty limited use.
Okay.
So
Surprisingly though, I've seen a lot on my clematis.
really,
Oh,
I
yeah.
have a pink clematis that grows up in the back of my deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, they love that thing.
Well, there's some native
The
clematis
little
too.
ones, the little bees, like the sweat bees and the
Which
longhorn
clematis
bees.
is
There's just something about it at the store because it was pretty and it was pink.
yeah. And there are exceptions. I
Well, it-
agree.
Isn't Viticella, that one might be native, and that's the ancestor of some of the big ones.
I don't know if it is.
It's a little tiny flower, it's about this one around.
Okay. Yeah, I've got things that are not native that they use too, as a rule. So our pollinators evolved with native plants. Our native pollinators did anyway. So exotics may not provide the same values that our native pollinators want, and so on. So there are some exotics with high nectarine use. We all know that tall sedum autumn joy, pollinator favorite. Buddleia, butterfly bush, pollinator favorite, and an invasive species in several states. So it's being banned in several states. I know it goes like a weed in the Northwest. It just lines the roadside ditches up there. And Seven Suns tree is a Chinese tree that's kind of rare in its own
Love that
habitat. But in the fall, the monarchs just flock to the top of the tree.
Hummingbirds.
There's a really cool thing on YouTube that shows how to cut your butterfly bushes down
Yeah.
so that they can use the stems and
Ah.
all the way through.
Okay,
So it's gonna be cool.
okay. Use the stems.
It's supposed to be better for the plant too, to cut it back a little bit so it'll grow
Oh, yeah.
more, but that also gives it access following spring, so.
Bees?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. To get plant lists, if you want, online, you can go to the Xerces Society, terrific resource. They have pollinator-friendly native plant lists by region, by ecoregion. And for us, that includes their Northern Plains list and their Midwest list. You'll find a lot of plants in there that we can grow and do great for pollinators. The National Wildlife Federation has a list of keystone native plants by ecoregion. And then Heather Holmes' books. She's got two that I know of about bees. She's got one about wasps and maybe others. So where do you find native plants locally? Nowadays, it's like there's an abundance of sources. When I was starting years ago, I was just gardening like most people, but I wanted some native plants. There was basically only a few. Like you could get Joe Pye, you could get New England aster, and whatever bluebird nursery sold, because
That's where I got all my bluebirds.
that's what Nebraska State Wood Arboretum sold in the spring fair, was bluebird nursery plants. And thank you, Harlan Hammernick, for bringing some native plants to that. So, but nowadays, I mean, you got Prairie Legacy, you got Midwest Natives, Great Plains Nursery in Weston mostly for woody plants, but also for perennials. Mulhall's have got their native plant tables, and I think it's pretty decent. Benson Plant Rescue is now getting a lot of plants from Prairie Legacy and Midwest Natives, and they sell a lot of them. And I'll say that incidentally, occasionally you'll find some bluebird nursery plants at Indian Creek or at Design, and I'm sure other nurseries have some kind of native plants. And then the local organizations have just popped up. Well, you're 14 years old now, right? At least. So that's cool. But there are more and more organizations, and you know about that more than I do.
And you have Nebraska statewide arboretum, you can actually visit there, not just like go online, but you can go physically to that place.
You actually don't even sell online.
They have sales almost every week.
They have a sale next Saturday.
504, or Camp Gifford.
Camp Brewster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Camp Rooster sale is their
There's
stuff.
one next week.
It's Nebraska statewide arboretum and 504 is partnering. It's on our website, I put it on there.
I think Saturday night.
And it's,
Same
they're
time at
mostly what they grew themselves.
Farmers Market.
So I mean, mostly natives. Whereas when they have their spring affair sale in Lincoln, it's from Clarkson, from Bluebird Nursery in Clarkson. And it's huge array of natives and non-natives.
Yes.
I
Anyway,
think this will
ride
be-
with me next year, you can go.
And they just built, if you might know, State Wood Arboretum just cut the ribbon on their new greenhouse, so they can do a lot of their own propagation now for, the natives mostly. So we can go through a bunch of plants, if you want to do that. So in spring, do we need dandelions? Many trees supply early spring nectar and pollen for pollinators. Maple, buckeye, cherry, red bucket, tulpa, coffee tree, tulip tree, linden, wayford ash. So these are from April through May. Some of these are blooming. Shrubs are very useful for pollinators in spring and through spring into summer, like serviceberry, early blooming, dogwoods, early blooming, chokecherry. Nannyberries are done blooming now, at least some of them. My false indigo is done blooming. The wild plums, I don't know if they've started blooming yet. I think 9-bark is done, isn't it?
Mine hasn't started.
I'm not sure, but so there are a lot of shrubs. You don't have to have perennials for every part of your bloom season. In fact, going back here, this doesn't mention that a lot of wind pollinated plants are decent nectar source or pollen sources for pollinators, for bees. So oaks, even pines, evergreens can be a good source of pollen for bees. So we don't need those dandelions. That's all we have. Let's go ahead and keep the dandelion. So starting in April, I'm just going to show you plants that I have. Virginia bluebells. It's native actually farther east of us, not right here, like all the way to maybe western Missouri or something like that. But I grow it. I love it. It's ephemeral. It's already gone. I can't tell where it was. It's 2 feet high in April and May. And I was very busy with these little carpenter bees. Ask flowers, you might know, very early bloomer, short plant, likes it dry and rocky. Let's see, this is if this video will play, maybe we can see. Oh, I had trouble with this playing once before. So anyway, there's a swarm of bees around it. April into May, Virginia waterleaf is not usually sold even by the native plant people. It's a common understory plant in forested areas. Mine, I think, is just finished blooming. It must have bloomed for 6 weeks. When the pollinators will visit, it does spread a little bit by seed, but if you have a little shady area, a woodland area, it's terrific. This is wild geranium. Maculatum, I think, is what its species name is. Hard to see them actually land on anything. They do. This plant already looks ratty and tatty. It's already half brown, curled up. So it's going to look like that for the rest of the year. So it's not for your ornamental garden, but it's a native plant and they use it. Golden Alexander, that's already done blooming in my yard. And the spiderwort, that purple flower, it comes in various shades, blue, purple, pink. Very popular with bumblebees. The baptisias are done blooming at my place, the wild indigo. There are several species, but the main one you would want to look for, there's yellow, there's white. But the blue or purple one is the early bloomer that is most likely to get used. Penstemons rock. Yeah, my penstemons are this tall this year, right? The Husker red variety and the slender penstemon. And the bumblebees, that's what they load up on this time of year. That's where I find them all. Of course, it's not the only thing in my yard, not the only thing, Coreopsis, but it's one of the few things blooming right now in this shoulder kind of season between the ephemerals and getting into summer. But it's a very great bumblebee plant. There's hairy penstemon, which is shorter and pink, and hairy, and that's a good one for them. And then the slender penstemon Husker red is the variety that's commonly find, and it's perfectly fine. Solomon seal is blooming right now for me. Bumblebees will use that. It's good for shade. It spreads very slowly by rhizomes, about 2-3 feet high. And the only hydrangea I know that's really popular with pollinators is the smooth hydrangea, which is native, again, more east and south of us, not right here. Let's say in Missouri, maybe Iowa, that part of the country. But I get a lot of good pollinator use on this variety called Annabelle. Right now, for me, the Missouri evening primroses are blooming. We saw the sweat bees like those. Very showy, doesn't get more than about 1 foot high and maybe a couple feet wide. Very showy yellow flowers. People will stop on the street and say, "What is that?" We all know purple coneflowers, I think, terrific pollinator plant. Again, it's not actually native right here. But in my yard, compared to the pale purple coneflower and the narrow leaf coneflower, it is much more attractive pollinators than those two. Which
Are yours really tall this year?
Yeah,
Mine got ridiculously tall this year. And they haven't bloomed yet,
no, they haven't bloomed yet.
and they're still growing upwards.
Peaches like
So there's,
it. Peaches like it.
yeah.
They do, yeah.
My favorite pollinator plant, wild bergamot. Actually, I collected some seeds from a plant I stumbled across down near Fontenelle Forest 20 years ago on my job, on my duties. And I've got a lot of them, given a lot of them away, but such a variety of pollinators use wild bergamot. It usually stands up real well, does great in sun or a bit of shade. 4 feet tall,
I cheated on mine and I bought the grape.
Oh,
It's
the
a
grape
grape variety,
Oh, that's-
it's just covered.
covered with pollen.
Yeah,
I
and
know.
the hummingbirds,
Hummingbirds.
I have tons of hummingbirds on them right now.
Coral bells and
The coral bells and the bergamot, and it's just as
And
purple as
comfrey.
they get.
Yeah.
I love it.
Does yours have real aggressive rhizomes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
I took mine out because of that.
well,
I
I think
know.
what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna promote that for all of our hill strip gardens on Garden
Okay,
Avenue. And have
okay.
them put them around their mailboxes, so
Yeah.
that'd be a really good container.
They can
area.
contain with the mowing.
And have tons of color, tons of pollen and whatever, but they're not gonna take over your yard.
Right. Oh, that's a
They
good
they are
idea.
aggressive.
But this is not, this wild bergamot, the rhizomes are like, might get an inch wider each year.
Oh, no.
Oh,
No?
Purple.
mine,
No, I know the
Yeah.
purple, I know the purple, but that's a Monarda didyma variety. That's
yeah.
not Monarda fistulosa.
The fistulosa, if it's happy, it can take over. Yeah.
I only get seedlings, I don't get.
Well, I had it over at the 13th and Leavenworth Garden, and it's moist, and it was
Okay.
it took
Okay.
over an area from here to there.
Oh, okay. My
But
rhizome,
the bees loved it.
yeah. So again, this is just show the variety of the clear wing sphinx moth in the upper left. The bumblebee, the tiger swallowtail, the silver spotted skipper, whatever kind of bee that is. Just a variety of things that use wild bergamot. Terrific. Common milkweed, I'm going to say a couple things about. It is very aggressive by rhizomes. If you don't like a stem, you can pull it up, pop it off the rhizome, wear your gloves. I've got I just pulled about 15 stems, still got about 30. I think that's going to be enough for the butterflies.
But again, it's a good hill strip garden. It's a good hill strip plant.
Yeah, sidewalk
They can't
dictated.
go anywhere.
Well, if it's less than about 8 feet to your next,
I've
Yeah,
never
it-
had them go under the
but it-
sidewalk, no
It
one's.
can go under.
Can it?
they go under my lawn and come up in the other bed.
You like
I've had them in flower pots and they come out of the flower
Out
pots.
the bottom of the flower pot?
But the swamp milkweed, I don't have a picture of. It's much better behaved than a garden plant. The thistle, probably not a lot of you have grown this, so I can talk about this. I grew the the pasture thistle, and I grew the tall thistle, and the tall thistle, I wanted to lay over, I couldn't keep it standing, so I eventually cut it out, but the pasture thistle, or field thistle, Circeum discolor, stayed pretty upright for me. And it got about 6 feet tall, and 4 feet wide, and it was an amazing pollinator magnet. Anything with a long proboscis, use that thing. And I had to deadhead it every other day because it makes so many flowers so quickly. And it's a seed, it's a biennial, so its goal is to make a zillion seeds.
And what's the species on that one?
Circeum discolor,
Discolor?
goal is a seed. So I was dead because I live in an urban, I don't want all my neighbors to get this one. I'm already kind of a problem for me. I've got several of my plants already. But not fair, because I got some of their vinca and gutweed and,
It still is?
so that junk. So,
Which are the thistles that are illegal to grow?
Well, I don't know what the city ordinance is exactly, but I saw the language recently, and it says plants with prickly spines are not allowed. It said a lot of things are not allowed that I do. Your compost bin can't be more than 4 by 4 by 5 or something like that.
It's bigger than that.
Oops. And so, obviously, noxious thistles, noxious weed thistles like Canada thistle, maybe musk thistle. You cannot grow those. But you can buy and grow, aside from whatever the city ordinance might be, I don't know. You can buy and grow pasture thistle and tall thistle.
So what's the difference again? I'm sorry.
Well, tall thistle, well,
The noxious weed that you
noxious
cannot
weeds
grow.
are exotics. They're very aggressive they're invasive, they're aggressive by rhizome and seed, very difficult to eradicate. Canada thistle is just a scourge to try to get rid of. So those are not legal. Those are against state law to grow.
Okay.
If you have those in your field, you kind of are obligated by law to go kill them. And I garden at the zoo, and the zoo had a population of them outside by the entrance. So, but this thing, it's a biennial, it does not spread by rhizome, it spreads by seed, so I was deadheading it religiously. And I still had about 100 seedlings this spring.
Really?
But they're very easy to pull, they're not pokey, they pop right out of the ground. And I actually gave a bunch to Grasslands Unlimited for their prairie restoration they're doing. So I hope those work for them. This is a great pollinator plant if you want to intensively manage it.
If you go through the drive-through at Panera, right now there's a whole bunch of those through there. And back to your point, the golden finches are everywhere on those things.
Oh, they like this.
Yeah, they're all over. You sat in that drive-through, look at the thistle through there, there's finches everywhere.
But those might be the other kind.
Look at that over there. Thistle.
I know, but there's like a whole lot of species.
Oh, yeah, and it's wild area, so. I'm sure they don't manage it.
If they're white underneath, they're native. So you have to look at the underneath
If
is
you guys
white.
are gonna have an informative conversation, you should both speak up.
Okay, so,
So
and the
I'm
white,
just gonna run through a few more quickly here.
the white,
Slender mountain mint, very
native ones
short
have
plant.
white
We
underneath.
should.
This is Blue Fortune hyssop. It's a hybrid of our native hyssop and Korean hyssop. But when the Painted Lady migration came through, they loved it. It's a great one. Don't forget the native grasses. And then as we get through later in the year, Joe Pye weed is a great one. You can get the cultivars from every nursery, Gateway or the others. They're still great. The Liatris is a great late season plant. Of course, the tall sedum, autumn joy, wonderful nectaring plant for pollinators. Goldenrod's fireworks is the best behaved goldenrod that you'll find for sale most places. It's a cultivar, it's not the native straight species. But showy goldenrod, I'm growing. This is why I'm going to keep growing it.
Wow.
Here's loving it. And then, of course, your asters getting into fall, and that's the end of my talk. So the extension would really like it if you did a little survey. You can either do it by this QR code. I brought some papers. If you want to take those and do them later, you can use that URL and go to the website or something. So it's like a 5-question survey. So they would really appreciate learning whether, when we talk through them, what the outcome is. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Want to make sure everybody's signed in, so that if you want to get on our email list, and then, does anybody else have anything to share?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe you said this earlier in the meeting since I wasn't real prompt today. What are the petitions over here about? I don't know.
There's just one, hold on just a minute.